today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about
how we get stuck in negative conflict. What is it about our brains and our body chemistry that leads us to get stuck? Some people just avoid it. And if you avoid conflict, then you avoid growth. If I win when I'm emotionally hijacked and my partner loses, I actually lose, because partnerships are predicated on win-win, not win-lose. Welcome to Rich in Relationship. I'm your host, Rich Heller, and today we're going to talk about understanding why we get stuck in negative conflict. I mean, how long have you been experiencing negative conflict or avoiding it? Some people just avoid it. And if you avoid conflict, then you avoid growth. How long has that been going on? And why is it that we can't seem to get out of this cycle of either being in negative conflict or avoiding it? Why can't we move toward positive resolution? And the answer, my friends, is locked in neuroscience. So without getting too nerdy, I'm going to try and give you some education on our brains and what's going on with our brains that's causing this seemingly, but actually not, endless cycle of conflict. Because what we're looking for here in this podcast is to give you the tools that you want, need, and desire to end the fight. So why do some couples get stuck in cycles of conflict even when both partners want to resolve the issue? The answer is the brain's emotional response to conflict through the limbic system and amygdala can keep us locked in patterns of negative conflict. In this episode, we're going to clear all that up for you so you understand it, get it, and can begin to take control of your own brain, right? And this may seem like a mystery. It may seem like outside the realm of possibilities. Maybe this has been going on for so long, the concept seems alien. So I want you to really open yourself up here. Because like the hair club for men, not only am I the president, but I'm also a satisfied customer. All right, so what is the limbic system? The limbic system is the brain's emotional center. It governs how we react to emotional stimuli of all kinds, including conflict. And one of the operators in the limbic system is the amygdala. So our brain, in case you don't know or are not sure, has many parts. And the amygdala is responsible for detecting threats and triggering a quick emotional reaction to threat, especially fear and anger, right? The amygdala sits on top of our spinal cord. It's kind of wrapped in the rest of our brain. It's thought to be very primitive, very old, and it has almost no there's no rational ability. The whole purpose of the amygdala, if it senses the possibility of danger, it's supposed to trigger our response in our body so that we're either going to fight the danger, run from the danger, or play dead. Right? Those are the three basic responses. That is the whole purpose of the amygdala. It is vital and necessary. When you're crossing the street, if you see a car barreling at you and you jump out of the way, that's because your amygdala saw the danger, created a chemical response in your body where suddenly you had a whole lot more energy than you did, and you were able to leap out of the way of that car. That is the amygdala doing you a service. However, in our marriage, our personal relationships, the amygdala may mistake something for an oncoming vehicle that actually isn't. And that's what we call emotional hijacking. The amygdala hears something that your partner said or sees an action that your partner took and processes it as a possible danger, and it creates a chemical reaction. So the same adrenaline that saved you from being run over the car is now injected into your conversation with your partner, and you move from being logical and caring to being fearful, maybe even hostile. And that a lot of that is chemically driven. And when we have an amygdala hijack during our argument, we are going to lash out and say hurtful things in the heat of the moment. We may actually behave in ways that are threatening to our partner, if that's part of how we're wired when the amygdala kicks in. Now, I know you've all experienced this. I know you've all experienced that moment when all of a sudden the switch goes off and you're off to the races, right? We've all had that experience where all of a sudden we know that we're right and we're going to show them. Right. And that basically what we call the fight here at Rich in Relationship is what's commonly known as an amygdala hijack. The fight is when both people are looking to win and put down the person on the other side. Or one of you is, and the other person starts to react to that. That's the fight. And when we have the fight, if I win when I'm emotionally hijacked and my partner loses, I actually lose, because partnerships are predicated on win-win, not win-lose. If my partner were actually the enemy, if that car barreling down the street was some evil organization trying to kill me because I was in the way of what they wanted, and I leapt out of the way and took out my rocket launcher and blew them up, right? That might be a win because I'm in a constant oppositional relationship with that organization. But my partner and I are in an accidentally oppositional position. My amygdala has been triggered. Maybe their amygdala has been triggered. And for a moment, we start to see each other as the evil other instead of our partner. And that, my friends, is when marriages run amok. Now, why does this go on, and how do we stop it? Well, in the next episode, we're going to talk about how to pull ourselves. Actually, in the next episode, we're going to talk about discourse and diatribe, dialogue and debate, how to have a positive resolution and how of differences, and the dynamic or feeling of when it's going the wrong way. And then the episode after that, we're going to talk about how to work through this stuff. But in this episode, I just want you to understand what's going on inside of you with your brain. Most of the time, we're not being hijacked by our amygdala. Most of the time, we're pretty reasonable. And that's because we've got this thing called the prefrontal cortex. Our cerebral cortex and our prefrontal cortex are the places where logical, rational decision-making is made. It's where impulse control happens. It's where we assess situations and make sound judgments. Now, in a calm situation, that part of our brain is dominant. In a calm situation, the prefrontal cortex is deciding what it is we can focus on. The amygdala is maybe helping it because it hasn't taken over. It's just saying, oh, it's okay. This is safe. It's okay. Ooh, that feels a little dangerous, right? But we wend our way through it without a full-on amygdala hijack, without going into adrenaline and all that other good stuff. However, during intense conflict, all of our energy goes to the amygdala, and brain studies show in intense conflict, there's no activity or almost no activity in the prefrontal cortex. All the attention is in the amygdala. And that's why the reaction is so intense and so immediate. And a part of us recognizes that the reaction is emotional, and a part of us recognizes that it might not be even helpful, but it almost feels powerless to act because the amygdala is in control. And the way this works is the more that we get into these kinds of confrontations, the more our amygdala grows. It physically grows. And the more our cerebral cortex and prefrontal cortex actually physically shrink. And when this goes on and on and on, our amygdala becomes hypersensitive. And the impact on the prefrontal cortex is that it's weakened and its function is reduced. We have a harder and harder time thinking clearly. We have a harder and harder time solving problems or regulating our emotions in the future. And that's why when you go into neighborhoods where there's been a lot of poverty, you tend to meet people who have very active amygdalas and their prefrontal cortex is less active. And people who live in prolonged poverty develop a reputation for not thinking much, for not being too smart, right? And we start to say, the reason why they're living in poverty is they're not too smart. And there is some truth to it, right? When we live in emotional poverty in our marriage, it's because we feel like we're in a bad neighborhood in our marriage, and we're not too rational and we're not too smart about how we talk to our partners. And we either spend a lot of time avoiding each other so that our amygdala doesn't get fully activated, but it's always on duty, or we're fighting so regularly that our amygdala is just engaged. All right, to sum it up, when conflict becomes regular, or the fear of conflict, really it's just the fear of conflict becomes regular, the amygdala becomes hyper alert for preparing for battle, and the prefrontal cortex struggles to regulate emotional responses. And by the way, you'll start to notice this in other areas of your life. We start to experience emotional burnout and stress response. Like the impact on our nervous system is that it stops working as well. We're tired a lot of the time. We're irritable. We have emotional fatigue. The small disagreements start to feel overwhelming. And without the resolution of disagreement, without the creative resolution of disagreement, there is no real moving forward. And that is why 52% of marriages end in divorce, is because we've given ourselves a lot of freedom of expression, but we have not mastered our own brains. And so part of the solution is going to be mastering our own brains. And our brain is masterable. We do get to make a choice. The choice is harder when we've been in a high amygdala triggered situation for a long time. But we can choose our way out. We can choose to lead a life where our cerebral cortex and prefrontal cortex are developing and growing, and where our amygdala is shrinking. And we can do that without blame and without pinning it on the other person. We can do that completely on our own. In fact, in a long-term marital conflict, I have often helped one member of the conflict to resolve 80 or 90% of the problem by doing the work on their own amygdala and own cerebral cortex, completely separate from their partner. And what happens with their partner is, in a marriage, when one person starts to chill that system out, the other person becomes less reactive as well. And there's the opening and opportunity for growth. And that's what we're going to talk about in the episode after the episode on discourse, diatribe, dialogue, and debate. Thank you for listening. As always, go to Rich in Relationship for any relationship tools that you may need. And we've got free courses there. Check us out, richinrelationship.com.